Yeah. The 0 to 1 for me is just so, that's the kind of problem that I just adore. I think it's so fascinating and multifaceted as well.
Yeah. I find you multifaceted too, Kate, because it's so interesting how, you've really loved your role in operations. And I always associate operations with tightly bound structure,
Mm,
organization, and yet you also love flow. You
yeah.
love space for you to think and breathe and go where you need to go. You said, hey, instinct and gut intuition is a big thing for you. Sounds pretty on the opposite side of the spectrum, but how do you see that?
That's a good question. I think that operations or orchestration or conducting or whatever you want to use as your word of choice is about getting the best out of people. And so that's yourself and your team overall. And humans are not logical at all times and are not rigid. And so, thus it follows that the best way to work with a team and to get the best out of a team and to get the best out of yourself is to have a more layered approach. And so, if someone says to you, I don't have any energy left to do that, well, I'm not going to be able to definitely keep doing that thing that you just told me is really painful for you right now. It may mean they still need to do it. It may mean that it just needs to adjust in what it is. And so I think I have maybe a lot of fluidity and flexibility about how things get done in the best way for someone and for myself as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah. And that adaptability is super important, in the age of AI and all the other things that are coming up in our industry. Welcome to What Comes After. I'm your host, Janet Lee. Today's guest is Cait Collins. She's a startup executive with deep experience in operations and consumer experience, with a background spanning product development, mobile marketing, community building, and scaling systems. She began her career at Google before moving into the startup scene, where she led teams, grew companies, and helped them through acquisitions. Over the years, she's also worn many hats as a founder, investor, and advisor. And today, she's an entrepreneur in residence. I'm so excited to dive into her journey and insights today. Welcome, Kate. How are things?
Things are good.
Awesome. Thanks for getting on our podcast. I know it's named What Comes After, but I usually take my guest speakers kind of from the beginning. And so if there's anything you want to share about your earlier days before you became adult Kate.
I grew up spending every summer on my Grammy's farm in
Oh.
tiny town Florida. So some of my earliest memories were actually working with her on the farm, and she would give me fun jobs. So I got really good at this little adding machine, and then the farmers who would come in would bring their produce, and then I would
Ooh.
actually add it all up and then tell them what did we owe them, like whatnot. And I remember there was an auditor actually who was there for a few weeks.
Mm.
And at one point, the auditor said, like, your granddaughter messed this up. And my Grammy said, my granddaughter is very, very good at her
Oh,
work. And so I actually think you should double check your work.
I
And it
love
turned out
that.
the auditor was wrong. And I was somewhere between 8 and 12. So like I grew up thinking work was fun. I also grew up thinking I was just very capable because my Grammy always
Mhm.
enforced that and reinforced that and whatnot. But yeah, like for
I
me,
love
a
that.
lot of my formative childhood years was like bopping around with Grammy, which was like going to work.
Oh my goodness. And also she was so supportive. Like
Yeah.
she instilled work ethic. She knew that you had it in you. And it seemed like maybe there was like a good blend of work and play. And
Yeah.
maybe it was a good way to not even distinguish at times. You're like, wait, is play work? Is work play?
Yeah, I would say there was a lot of blend of that, right? Because we'd get up, she would make me breakfast, we would go to the office, we would work until lunch. I was always given quarters to go get my favorite soda out of the machine. We would do little rituals every day. Like we'd go across the street and get figs from the person who was selling figs. We'd like do her errands around town. Once I got old enough, they'd let me drive the truck around on the farm. So it was actually like
Ooh.
a lot of fun for me. It was my favorite part of actually my childhood overall.
Oh. And so while you were doing that, you're like, yes, I do want my own farm and I want to be a farmer. Is that what you were thinking?
No, okay, so when I was a little kid, I, first wanted to be a veterinarian because I
Mm.
loved animals, and then I told her, I don't know, it was maybe 6 months or so later, I said, "Oh, I wanna be a lawyer," and she said,
Mm.
"Caitlin, you can't grow up and be evil," and I've worked with so many lawyers now, I really like, obviously, I do not think that is the case, but she, like, vetoed that path as well. And then I used to pretend to take calls from her back deck. So I probably always thought I would be a business person, and she never
Ooh.
assuaged me away from that. But I remember when I went to college, I called her and I said, I'm going to be a psychology major. I figured it out because I read the
Wow.
psychology book like from the bookstore in the first few days of college, actually, because I thought it was so fascinating. And she said, "Well, what in the hell are you going to do with that?" And I said, "Well, I figure I'll always work with people, so it should go well for me." And she just said, "Whale." So that's like if she says well, that's her kinda like approval mark. So I moved
Mm.
forward, probably, overall with psychology, liberal arts college, but always with the kind of like small business or business mentality in my blood.
Super cool. And
Yeah.
so East Coaster
Yep.
considers different college options and you get landed in California. What was that like?
Yeah, and I would say probably Southern is the identity for me over East Coast.
Oh, tell me
Um
more.
Yeah, so well, Grammy was in the tiny town Florida. I grew up in Chapel Hill predominantly, which is not as southern as some different places, but Live Oak, Florida is quite southern. So I think that's kind of like the some core identity that I have. But yeah, I don't know. I think I had this little teenage streak when I was considering schools, and I had in my head, I will only consider schools in California. So I
Mm.
visited Stanford, UC Berkeley, and Pomona College. And I remember UC Berkeley, I was like, this is really beautiful, but no one is really engaging with each other. Like you could tell a lot of people did not know who people were. And
Mm.
then I won't go into the Stanford vibe. Okay, so the Stanford vibe felt I've told my best friend who's a Stanford grad this. It felt like a lot of like preening or peacocking for me. And I was like, I don't know that this is the place for me, although I know some wonderful Stanford people. And my best friend, I would say, like, is a Stanford peacock. I would call her that. Um, but I went to Pomona and I noticed that everybody would say hi to our tour guide. Like we'd go around,
Mm.
they'd be saying, "Hey, Colleen." And I thought, okay, this feels like a really strong community and connection. That's what I want for myself. So I only applied to Pomona College, which sounds absurd. And if my two children do that for their college process, I will also be very like, what are you thinking? And my mother was absolutely saying, what are you thinking? She's in academia. But I told her, well, I applied early. And so if it doesn't happen, then I'll have time to apply to other schools or I'll take a year off and do AmeriCorps.
Mm.
And I think that that's always been something is I've always had like a not that like a plan B that is reasonably good in my
Sure.
mind. And so she accepted that as a response. And I think probably didn't sleep until I got the acceptance letter.
Yes. And you did get it.
Yes, and I got in. So, whew, whew.
Yes. What are some things you started noticing that were like, huh, what I took as the norm growing up, wait a minute, something is different now. Things
Uh,
are shifting. Are you learning about others? Are you learning about yourself?
well, one the first thing that came to mind, which is a little bit silly overall, is I hadn't eaten any spicy food growing up.
No.
Yeah, and so I moved to SoCal, and I don't know what pho is at this time. I haven't really eaten spice before, and so many times people would make fun of me for not knowing what things were. And that I guess that was something like that was the first time and I had a lot of homesickness the first year because I hadn't been in an environment where I was sort of like yeah, like chagrined for not knowing things. But I
Mhm.
took that pretty seriously to the extent I probably burned off some of my taste buds practicing eating spicy food until
Oh,
I could really have a high tolerance.
that's so funny. And so you're kind of exploring different identities, cultures, and then psychology.
Yeah.
Upon close to graduating, where was your head? Or were you thinking, let me go get a graduate degree and start being a psychologist? Or
Okay, I this is kind of funny, and I don't know. There should be a word. There probably is some really perfect German word that encapsulates this. But I think sometimes that I feel the guilt of how lucky I have been. And
Mm,
so when I was graduating from Pomona, I actually got a call from a recruiter at Google in
wow.
2007.
Mhm.
And this person named Jake, and he said, "Hi, you have you considered Google as a place for you to work after graduation?" And I remember I wanted to go live in Seattle, San Francisco, or Barcelona after graduation. I actually
Wow.
had a place in mind as opposed to what I would do in mind because the energy of those three places had always felt really amazing for me. He said, "Yeah, we're in Mountain View. A lot of people live in San Francisco." And so "Yeah, okay, I'll explore that." So I went and interviewed at Google and then ended up working at Google for the first 2 years out of college. I often call it operational finishing school because you have amazing coworkers, you
Yeah.
learn all of these good practices, like how to run a meeting, how to run a project on time, and whatnot. So yeah, I can feel it in myself. I feel that guilt of the good luck, but I kind of like lucked myself into like probably the best job for me coming out of college.
Oh, I love that. I mean, preparation meets opportunity is what people say, right? And maybe in your own way, there
Yeah.
was some preparation.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. I think that's a good framing.
Yeah. I kind of felt the same when I my first job was at Apple for 2 years, and so kind of like what you said, it's a finishing school. You kind of learn how to be a worker in some ways and have some structure in place, so I think it was a really good training ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I felt very fortunate for that.
And then were you thinking, "I love San Francisco, I'll be here forever, I'll be forever with Google." What was going in your head?
Okay, so I spent 2 years at Google, and it was really phenomenal overall as a place to work. Sorry, I'm petting. There's a little Frenchy dog who is moving
Oh.
beside me and adjusting himself. So I worked there for 2 years, and I ended up leaving Google. And the main reason why is I felt like I could fail, and it wouldn't entirely matter. Like you were very resourced. Even like I think the product development philosophy there is a little bit more tolerant of failure than maybe I am. I'm kind of
Mhm.
my mentality is, yeah, try things, and if you fail, know why, and then get better at what it was, or like know why and that there isn't room to get better on this.
Mhm.
And then I was, of course, meeting a bunch of people who are in the startup scene. So I thought, well, I should go look into joining a startup because then I will learn what it is like to be on kind of the starve budget and whatnot through my mind.
Aw. I'm sure you made Mammy proud to strike out on your own and try something new.
Yeah, I think so. She's always kind of like, "What are you doing?" But yeah, as long as I can defend what it is, like I think there's a. I've always felt a really healthy challenge from her.
Mm, yeah. And so, you're looking for an opportunity where you could fail in some ways
Mhm.
and get real feedback.
Yeah.
Where did that lead you?
So I went to a mobile startup because I'd been working on Android market at the tail end of my career at Google. So I leveraged that to move into the mobile ecosystem. I
Mhm.
was at an ad network and I landed an operations job there. And a few months into my role, my manager said, "Hey, there are these directed developer campaigns. They're kind of annoying, but you get commission." And
Mm.
I had worked on a commission basis for my college newspaper. I was like, "I love commission." So I'm really
Ooh.
happy to to take on these developer campaigns. A few quarters later, I was the number one salesperson. That was announced actually in a meeting in front of the sales team, which was not a comfortable meeting for me. But what had happened is I had started working with these app developers. And this is again, it's like 2009 to 2011. This is the heyday of the app store where you could actually
Boy.
like game the rankings and whatnot. And so a lot of these app developers had really large budgets to promote their apps or their games, but no one was really working with them in a more like white glove way to unlock their budget. And
Mm.
so if it was, giving them a little model, if it was doing ad creative, it kind of didn't matter what it was. I would just work with them to figure out what were their goals and then it was sometimes just me and one other person, because that was their company, but I could complement their skill sets to run a successful campaign.
Mm.
Yeah. And it was cool because actually then I got to work with the CTO at the startup to productize it. So it was like an end-to-end little new P&L that I got to start.
Wow. So in this moment, you didn't feel this at Google, but were you saying, "Oh, I could stay here for a long time"?
That's such a good question. I think that especially early on in my career, probably the theme of it is I really wanted a high pace of challenge. And then I also just didn't know a lot of things as well. And so that company, that startup got acquired. And when they got acquired, one of my clients said, "Hey, I'm doing something over here. It was within a gaming studio. And I think you'd be an amazing product manager for this new initiative that we're starting." His name was Clive. He said something to me that really stuck. He said, "You know, I think you could keep doing that job that you're doing, but if you're a little scared about the job that I'm offering you, I think you should come take the job with me because that'll challenge you and stretch you more."
Ooh,
And I don't know, that was like the line. I was like hook, line, and sinker. I was ready to accept that job.
amazing.
Yeah.
Some people rise to the occasion, some people are scared to. What do you think kind of made you want to try it?
I think I've always been that way. If you like triple, my sister and I joke about this. She's like, if I triple dog dare you to do anything, you will do it. Like, it's a little bit about the challenge and the can I and the find out if I can. I've
Mm,
always been like attracted to that.
yeah. And also as a parent, do you feel like that could be cultivated or how do you think it came about?
Oh man. Okay, this is something that yeah, so I have two little people, two little guys, and I think I coddle them too much. So I do think it can be cultivated, and I'm not sure if I'm effective at cultivating it, even though I think it was effectively cultivated in me. And I've thought about these things, right? Like I think Grammy was a good example of someone who would like just assume capability. And that's like so much safety to stretch yourself from. Whereas my father was a lot about challenging me, right? So he would actually like set my brother and I up and he'd be asking my brother's homework questions, but he really like delighted if I got the homework question right sooner, which I think instilled this sort of competitiveness in me. I always say like I'm most competitive when it doesn't matter, as long as everyone's enjoying themselves. I think I also and my brother didn't like that, so I adjusted it a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think there is something in that mix of just like security, especially with my Grammy and some of the challenge and stretch. And then, it's interesting, like my mom is so driven as a person. Actually, like my therapist said this the other day. She said, I think you and your mom are so similar on that regard. And I
Oh.
think of something about just seeing that I hope sometimes what my boys see and pick up on is as positive as that.
Oh, I'm sure they will. They do already.
Yeah, hopefully, I think they're perfect, but maybe
Oh,
spoiled perfect. So
yeah. And so there's this now mid-20s, exploring different things, trying different
Mhm.
places. What are you learning about yourself? What are the things that give you your own sense of security?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing, especially from a work and career perspective, that I noticed, and this was in my mid 20s, is that I started to feel as if I could work really hard, but it wouldn't matter at the end of the day in terms of
Oh.
an impact. So my first one was like, oh, I could work really hard or not, and it wouldn't matter. And I was like, I don't like that. I want to work hard and it
Mhm.
matters. And then I realized what I do could matter. And that was what got me interested in healthcare. I wanted to be in healthcare and education because for me, there was something about the tangible impact that I could have on people's lives at the end of the day that felt truly compelling. So that was the big one for me that shifted or adjusted, perhaps with some maturity.
Yeah. And did you notice you were kind of looking at people in that industry being like, ooh, I want to be like this person? Or was it kind of like, I'll try it out, see what happens?
No, yeah, it's interesting. I think I'm pretty high out on intuition. and
Mm.
that's sort of the gist of. And so I think that there were people who, especially at Google, I think were very formative. Like Claire Hughes Johnson was in my Noogler class. And I
Mm.
remember like sitting beside her and being, like, I would like to be you when I grow up. Like, this would be really, then I would be so effective and like also genuine and warm at the same time, which I think is a phenomenal combination. But no, I think it was just the intuition of if I work in an industry that touches people's lives, I will feel more fulfilled because I will understand what I'm doing and how it could positively impact people.
Yeah. And so plopping yourself into that industry, still in operations, what role?
Yeah. So this is also a little bit of a theme in my career. Like I more than once have just taken the foot in the door. And so this is something where I was in the founding team of a mobile app startup for healthcare. And the idea was that I would come in and run all the mobile marketing because I'd done
Mm.
mobile marketing and not a lot of people had done that.
Yeah.
But, like, when you're getting things off the ground, you don't have anything to market. And so I just started doing like everything. And so I was doing a mix of product and operations. And I remember I was chatting with the CEO and he said, "Hey, you're doing all of product and operations. That's fine with me as long as that's fine with you." And I was like, "Absolutely." He said, "Well, do you think there's one that you want to stay in more over time?" And I said, I think I can be a better operations person over
Mm.
time. So I choose that.
Great. And what did that look like? Were you a place where you start kind of leading teams or managing other people? Is it that you were closely working with more leadership now? Were there any
Yeah.
transitions?
It's interesting. I think so for me, the red thread for and what I believe firmly for operations, and I now believe this for product as well, is that to be really phenomenal at it, you do whatever needs to be done that is like your highest leverage. And at first for me, that was an individual model. So that was just like, okay, what can I do that would be highest leverage? And it started to become a team model of what is this person's strength? How can I put all the different pieces together to get this initiative done so that we can do it as efficiently and well as possible? But I think that was the model for me, or the mental model that I started to form and cultivate as I worked more in quote unquote operations. But it's so funny. Like if you look at what my role was, there was marketing, there was community, there was account management, I was product for some period of time. My CTO and I always joked. I was like, yeah, I'm technical. Just I can't code directly. But
Yeah. You were like the conductor in some
yeah,
ways.
I think that's apt.
Yeah. And there's a sense of, I don't know, I'm sure some listeners, they associate being a jack of all trades as something like, oh, I wish I can find a specialty of my own.
Yeah.
But maybe that would have been super limiting for you.
I got pushed on that actually multiple times in my career. What would I specialize in? And I used to have a lot of, I would say, personal kind of angst about that, feeling that I
Mhm.
wasn't enough because I didn't specialize, or I should be able to specialize, or I should be able to better explain what or who or what mold I fit into. And I finally let go of that because I was finding work that I enjoyed and people that I enjoyed working with. And I think, especially in an entrepreneurial, in a startup scene, there's less of that mold. And so, even people who are saying, oh, you need to specialize, I started to think, well, I don't. Is there something you want me to do differently? And I was like, no, you're doing phenomenally. So I said, well, maybe I don't need to specialize. And then I remember there was two CEOs that I worked with in succession with each other, Yadin and AG. And I think especially having them right after each other, they both kind of lifted that off of me. They're like, why?
Mm.
Like I said, well, I need to specialize. And they're like, why? You're supremely effective. I don't think you do. Maybe I would have gotten there on my own. I really appreciate getting there with them. And I certainly got there a lot more quickly with them telling me this.
Aw. If anyone was kind of asking the same questions themselves, what would you tell them?
Okay, so I believe something now, and I think it is true in a lot of aspects of life, and I think is very true in aspects of your career. And I'll first tell you how I came to believe this, and then I'll tell you the belief. I was fortunate to be in First Round Capital's Angel Track program.
Mm.
And that is such a neat program because they're really cool people that you get to meet. And you also have, you know, the most phenomenal VCs in the world telling you, this is my formula for how I find a startup that is like
Mhm.
going to be a unicorn like this is the way, this is my investment thesis. And I was sitting there and they're all different. I was like, well, wait a minute. This is the way that you find the best startup. This is the other way and what I started to realize is I started to think, well, you know what? The way that really matches that person, if they found a way that really matches who they authentically are. So if they're more of a people person, they say, oh, I just look at the founding team.
Mm.
If they're more of an analytics and numbers person, they say, oh, I look at this kind of data set. And I started to feel like, okay, wait, this is true. Like this feels true across all of life and certainly a career is if you can find the work and the way of working that matches who you authentically are, you will be successful because you will have the energy around it. It just like it feels in flow. It feels energetically abundant, I think, overall. And so I would
Mm.
tell someone if they were saying, oh, I don't know if I should specialize. I don't know if I should be a generalist. I would unpack with them. I would say, well, who are you authentically? Because
Mhm.
some people, the answer should be generalist. Some people, specialists, I'm sure there's a bunch of other answers there as well. But to me, it's more about, I think, that authentic match overall more than anything. So I feel fortunate I found mine, but I don't think it's everybody's.
Yeah. It really rings true for me too, Kate, what you're saying, because that's what I do kind of in my day-to-day coaching
Yeah.
sessions with others. And so it's really truly tailoring what you want to do.
Yeah.
And oftentimes external validation gets in the way. There's a little bit of shame around, hey, I'm this way, but why can't I just fit into this mold?
Yeah.
Why don't I fit here? Why don't I belong there? Instead of questioning, well, where else can I belong here?
And I think the other thing that I've found is true is when I'm in that mode in my life, I start to find more people who also are like that. Like you are a great example for me. It's one of the reasons I really enjoy spending time with you. I was like, well, Janet is very authentically, like you are very authentically yourself. And so I can feel that and I notice that. And so I think that's the other thing is you have these sort of like knock on effects,
Mhm.
not only for yourself, but it's also the people that you kind of energetically draw into your life or into your world.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're really running towards, the major milestones, the goals in the company.
Yeah.
Um, but you also talk about being part of the angel group.
Mhm.
When do you start kind of noticing that you're trying on different hats, whether that be as an operator, as an investor, as an advisor? Was it organic? Was it intentional? How did that come about?
Yeah, I think that actually started pretty early. And I actually, so for me, one of the big draws, I'll go back to Pomona, is when they described, it's called the PAC system, and it's a core liberal arts system. And when they described to me that I would not just learn my core, I would learn something else, that was always very attractive to me because I thought, oh, I'll have a
Mm.
lot of perspective. And I think I did that also in my career. So at that ad network, for example, when I was, I started as operations, but I took on a bunch of other roles. Similar with Mango when I'm in operations, but that's a very like sprawling kind of a thing. And what I started to notice is that if I could have what I really love, I will say, is if I can sit at the same table. So maybe the table is an ecosystem like mobile, but I can sit in a different seat. That is so fascinating to me because if I've sat in one seat, but I understand the three others at the table, I feel for me it's a more effective place for me to be, and it's a more related place for me to be as well. And so that's something that I think if I look, back, it was actually pretty early. It was what first made the college decision for me, and then I replicated it a few times over in my career. And I think I just started replicating it maybe in different ways or in broader ways. Because at first it was about roles, and then it became about, well, oh, I got to understand what's happening on this and the VC and the investor, like outside of just the company. Because at first I might have said operations versus product versus marketing versus engineering. And then I started to say, well, wait a minute, I got to be thinking about the company versus the investor versus the LPs. Like all of those things became interesting to me.
Um, And so, we celebrate the highs, right?
Huh?
We go on LinkedIn, everything is a I'm excited to share type of, sentiment.
Yep.
But you can't live without the lows. And along the way, whether that be your 20s, 30s, whatnot, what do you think were kind of like your dips along the way? And what were some really good learnings that you apply kind of in your life now?
I had a huge, massive fear when I had kids that
Mm,
I would not show up for them in like an engaged, active way. And that's what I've always wanted. I've always wanted kids and I always have loved working. And I had this big fear that those two things would be in such tension with each other and I wouldn't be able to balance it. Like, and when I say fear, I I really mean like I didn't sleep sometimes during my pregnancy thinking like, "Oh, how am I gonna do this and balance this?" And I think that is something it's also someone where I was starting to form a belief and then I had the good fortune to have someone really crystallize this belief. I was working with this person, James. This is when I first started getting into the entrepreneur and residence roles. And I said, this is something I've always thought about. And he said, "Oh, you can have it all. Like, you can be both an engaged and active mom, and you can be a really like powerful person in your career. And yeah, there's sometimes trade-offs on either side of that. It's just more about intentionality of which choice you're making. So it's a really high leverage choice for what you're doing in each of those situations. And I don't know, it was really fascinating because it became active. Actually, there was a work opportunity that I actually had with you or
mm,
related to you where I was supposed to take a trip and it fell on my oldest son's 5th birthday.
I
And I
remember.
remember thinking, yeah, I remember thinking, oh, I have to do this. And I was taught, and I had a one-on-one with James, and he immediately said, well, you can't go on that trip. And I don't think he was saying like, I won't allow you to, but maybe he, because he was like, you can't miss a 5th birthday.
Mm,
And so I think that's something that I really was afraid about. And I think as I've gotten better at understanding what I could say no to, both with my kids and on the work side, and that, going fine and it not being the end of the world. Because I used to feel like I just needed to say yes. And that was a really big tension for me for a long time. And I've been fortunate to find places where that is not an intention to exist. Like I recently, my manager today, I actually told him a couple weeks ago that I might have some more responsibilities with my kids coming up. And his immediate response was, your kids are so lucky to have such an engaged and active mom.
oh,
And you know who I'm going to work like so hard for is this manager because I was like, wow, like thank you for meeting me as a human and in my life and on what's important for me. Like he had no questions about my ability to get my job done. He just said,
mm,
lucky. Huh.
yeah. At the end of the day, we just need some empathy.
Yeah, I think so. For me, like connection with teams, relatedness with teams, connection with myself, it's like it makes everything all so much better.
Yeah. And I guess for you to learn that boundaries are important and also helpful and healthy, I'm sure you had moments where you did not feel that, and therefore that was a lesson in itself.
Yes, that would be accurate as well.
um, I only mention it because I feel like there's a lot of people who struggle with that topic, which is can I be my optimal self when other things need my attention
Yeah.
in my career path? And how does that change the journey? How does that change dynamics in relationships and et cetera? And some people feel paralyzed, but what was the thing that kind of got you over the hump of feeling paralyzed? And you're like, okay, I think I'm ready now to try both things at the same time.
Yeah, I am gonna give you another Kate answer because it's not specific and it's not what I learned at the time, but what I wish I'd known
Mm,
at so at the time it was having really phenomenal people who I was working with. So Yadeen, who I mentioned earlier in this conversation, I when I first had kids, I was working with him most closely. And that was something I don't this I'll say two things. One is that he was a parent himself and he really understood it. And so it doesn't have to be kids, right? It could be any topic, but finding someone who really understands and can naturally lend that empathy, I think can be one kind of force multiplier. But the thing I wish I had known that I do now as a practice is I learned to pull energy back into myself first. It's kind of a meditation. So you actually
Mm,
visually think about where all of your energy is, and it can
mm,
either be scattered or it can be at work or it can be, with your dog who has medical needs or wherever it is. But first, just drawing it all back into yourself before you make that next decision is something that I do as a practice now. And that for me is very clarifying. And I think when you can get to that clarity yourself first before you make a decision, that's one way that is effective for me. I'm sure there are, again, other ways that are most effective. But I think finding a practice that reliably leads you to clarity is very, very powerful overall.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
then you can start to have those kind of, it doesn't feel like boundaries, quote unquote, in that same way, because it's just like, no, this is clear. There's no question.
Mhm. Mm. And so fast forward, you've kind of tried on these hats:
Yep.
operating, investor, advisor.
Yep.
What's it like being an entrepreneur in residence? And for those who don't know what that is, how do you describe your job?
It's the best job for me ever. It's the best way to describe my job. So what it is because there's different definitions of this role, but for me as an entrepreneur in residence, the definition of the role is that I'm given a new topic area every 4 to 6 months or so is a typical time frame, and you end up with this question. So like, how might we enact some goal in some way such that that's the kind of typical way you might ask one of these questions, and then you essentially iteratively develop towards it with a lot of conversations with customers and essentially getting higher and higher fidelity on the nexus of what are the pains or share of head space that are existing within this ecosystem, what are the things that would actually solve it for people, and getting to higher and higher fidelity on what would solve it for people. And
Mm,
so that's some of the how of the work, but what you end up with is these like really well vetted, impactful initiatives, whether it's a full on startup, whether it's a new P&L, whether it's a new kind of broader initiative that has all the really wonderful underpinnings for something to be effective and impactful for people. And then the other piece of it, like for me, that's the why is, man, you get so tight with the group of people when you are working on this kind of work, because it is, it's high pace, it's challenging, it takes a lot of creativity, it takes a lot of just stamina, I think, and endurance overall. And it's something where I think you can really, really draw out the best in yourself and each other as well as you do this. But my job within that kind of ecosystem is essentially to be the initially kind of leader, but over time the coach for the team to move forward. And so that can have
mhm.
different iterations as well. Like the theme that I mentioned earlier in our conversation about I can actually just be whatever is needed rings true in this role as well. And then
Yeah.
you graduated off, and I feel sorrow for several days because I'm not working on that thing that I was so invested in. I think I'm practicing for my kids to go to college someday because it's a similar feeling where you're like, okay, you're almost an adult now. And so
Oh.
I've done my job, but yeah.
Yeah, there's beauty in 0 to 1, but there's
Yes.
beauty in also taking it to the next level.
Yeah. The 0 to 1 for me is just so, that's the kind of problem that I just adore. I think it's so fascinating and multifaceted as well.
Yeah. I find you multifaceted too, Kate, because it's so interesting how, you've really loved your role in operations. And I always associate operations with tightly bound structure,
Mm,
organization, and yet you also love flow. You
yeah.
love space for you to think and breathe and go where you need to go. You said, hey, instinct and gut intuition is a big thing for you. Sounds pretty on the opposite side of the spectrum, but how do you see that?
That's a good question. I think that operations or orchestration or conducting or whatever you want to use as your word of choice is about getting the best out of people. And so that's yourself and your team overall. And humans are not logical at all times and are not rigid. And so, thus it follows that the best way to work with a team and to get the best out of a team and to get the best out of yourself is to have a more layered approach. And so if someone says to you, I don't have any energy left to do that. Well, I'm not going to be able to definitely keep doing that thing that you just told me is really painful for you right now. It may mean they still need to do it. It may mean that it just needs to adjust in what it is. And so I think I have maybe a lot of fluidity and flexibility about how things get done in the best way for someone and for myself
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah. And that adaptability is super important, in the age of AI and all the other things that are coming up in our industry.
Yes, very much so. Agree. And
Yeah.
just that ability to have fun, right? To say, what if my goal is to make this fun? That's actually often is my intention, be it a hit class where the instructor will often ask like set your intention for yourself, or if it's going into a big high stakes meeting, or if it's
Mhm.
doing XYZ, I'll often say, you know what, my goal here is to have fun.
Mhm. Yeah, it takes the pressure, but also lets you get in the flow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Amazing different things that you got to try throughout your career. Do you foresee like what is the next evolution of Kate in the next 10, 15, 20 years?
Oh man. Okay, I will tell you the thing that I'm embarrassed to say, or I can feel myself hesitating to say, because that means it's really true, which is always a really fun trait. Once I noticed this in myself, when I pause to say something, it really matters. I would love to have my own, I think, small business
Okay.
again, and not in the same way like tech startup. Um,
Mm.
and maybe not full time, or maybe not full time to start. But there's something, even just earlier in this conversation when I was describing how it was to work
Yes.
with Grammy, like that's something that I've always thought is like, man, that's the place for me over time. Once I venture around and do these other things.
Oh, that is so amazing. Full circle.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I've just been picking up and all these, amazing skills and also meeting really wonderful people, and then I'll bring it all to bear.
Oh, I'm so excited to witness it and kind of see your journey
Yeah.
wherever and whenever that is.
Oh, well, I will keep you posted.
Yes.
You'll be in my top 5 to know. Easy.
Super excited. This is such a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Kate. And if there's like maybe one thing you want listeners to take away with as they're going through transitions and pivots in their career, like what would you kind of let them know of?
I think I'll go back to have fun.
Mm.
Right? Like get clarity and have fun. Like that's the combination that is, I think, most powerful if you really take that time. And I have little exercises for that. Like I've always done this exercise called the 5 non-negotiables. I stole it from a Bravo dating show, but applied it to other aspects of my life. But again, it's just like these little models to get to clarity and then give yourself that space and to say, like, okay, I have that clarity. I have that clarity on what I want, or I have that clarity on what's the worst that could happen, or I have that clarity on this is what truly matters to me. And then loosen up.
Mm. I could definitely use that advice too from time to time. So I'll take that in.
We can have a little thing. You send me whatever you choose the emoticon, and I'll
Okay,
write you back.
I'll do that. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, thank you.